So if anyone is not familiar with Git or GitHub, you can just let me know. If you're not familiar with it, because all right, familiar, that's awesome.
I'm not familiar with Git and GitHub.
That's absolutely fine, Nick. No worries. We'll walk through it on an introductory level so that um, we can work on the basics to make sure that whatever code I will be able to run will be shared so that you can access it later on at any point of time. That's one thing we'll work upon. Anyway, for now, moving back to this. Yeah, thanks for letting me know on that. So, yeah, again, just to recap, there might be a lot of scenarios where I might be going through some content which is more of a refresher for some of you, but it could be a new thing to some other person within this session. So, yeah, that could be a common case scenario that might happen when we have a diverse set of participants, right? So please bear with that. But at any point, feel free to ask if there are any queries throughout. So, yeah, to Baron's point, you can just download Visual Studio from here and just it's a straightforward installation. Just go ahead with this installation and we can get a window like this once it's installed. So the first time when it's installed, let's create a directory. Let's create a directory in which we can use it. So one of the first things that I often do is if we start with, let's say, Python tutorial, and I want to start VS Code within this, I generally go ahead, open my terminal in the directory in which I want to start VS Code, and I just write code space dot. That's pretty much it. So once you install VS Code, it can be accessible with the keyword code. It's basically the application name that is code. Followed by code, I'm just using dot, which indicates the current directory. Dot always indicates the current directory in these cases. So I'm just telling VS Code to open a VS Code environment or a VS Code instance within the current directory. And the current directory is Python tutorial for us. The moment I press enter, it should open VS Code. And you can take a look at this menu of it. In the top left, you have Explorer. Within Explorer, once you open it, you should see the current directory we are in. That is Python tutorial, which is the exact directory in which we started our VS Code. Generally, this is how I will use VS Code at our end, just so that we all know and we all are aware of this. Now, moving ahead from here, let's go on to the next part. Now, just to give an intro of IDE for those who are not aware of it, IDE, again, only the first session, maybe the first hour will be more theoretical than ever, but after that, we're going to go and dive deep into programming. So we'll definitely do that. It's basically called an integrated development environment. So it's basically going to give you a GUI, a graphical user interface within which you can write your code and debug it. Most importantly, we're going to use a lot of tools to debug our applications, which help us to figure out errors that we might encounter within Python and so on. It helps us do a lot of these things. And one of the best ones we can use is, of course, VS Code. Once you've got it installed, you can go to extensions, and here you can just search for Python. You should be able to see Python as the extension available from Microsoft, the one with this blue tick. You can just install that. Currently, I have it installed at my case, in my case, but you can just install that. Once it's installed, we can go ahead and start our first Python application. All right. So moving ahead from here, if again there are any queries so far, please let me know. Or if you'd like me to wait for a while so that you have all this set up before we go, or if you want me to walk through any part of this again, I'll just give you a few seconds, after which we'll move ahead and start our first line of code. All right, moving ahead. Before we start with the first line of code, we're gonna see a lot of animal names like Python, which is a reptile, and so on. But just to clear this misconception, a lot of Python developers have no idea that Python is not named for the reptile. Instead, Python was named because the developer of Python, Van Rossum, um, had to find some really good name that is simple and easy for his programming language. And one thing that he found was Monty Python, which was a comedy group in Britain back in the day, in 80s or something like that. And within this, he just took Python, indicating that this is something that is simple and easy to remember. It's basically based on a character. It's got no relation with the reptile. And this is one thing that I'll tell more when it comes down to more libraries in future as well. But yeah, moving back to this, let's start with our first application. Now, before we even start with the first application, another thing that is quite important for us to know. When you run command prompt within Windows and you type Python double hyphen version, you get to see what is the version of Python. You can also use Python to create your code and run it within the command prompt window or the terminal window. If you just type Python without any double hyphen flags and just press enter, it's going to enter this case where you have three right shift arrow marks indicating that whatever you type from now on or whatever you type ahead is going to be a Python command or it's going to be a Python statement that you can literally execute. I can just write something like a equals 5, b equals 10, and I can just write a plus b. It's going to give me the sum of them. Or I can just write something like a minus b, it's going to give me the difference of them, and so on. The idea that I'm just trying to put out here is that you can run Python directly within the terminal right here for reference. That's one thing that we just need to know and be aware of. This is something that we might use in time sometimes, but very rare cases, but just so we know about this. If you want to exit it, just use exit with parentheses. That's going to exit this, and you'll get back to your directory wherever you were in. Now, moving back from this, we're not going to use a separate window for command prompt. Instead, we're going to use a terminal within VS Code. There's a shortcut to open this terminal. I'm going to introduce this shortcut later on. But if you want to open the terminal, you can just go to Terminal tab on the top row and just click on New Terminal. And the shortcut is Control Shift and tilde simple. Once you click this, it's just going to create a terminal instance where you can again do the same. You can type Python. Again, just do whatever you want, b equals 10 or print a plus b, same thing as we did before, or exit it. And generally, when I do this, I end up typing CLS, which is clear screen, so that we don't have the content that we typed before available now to avoid unnecessary content on the screen. That's basically it. So all we got to do was just run the terminal within this VS Code instance. We have Python extension installed, and we can get started. Now, again, just just a couple of things we need to know before we start our first line of code. I know a lot of us are eager to do this, but let's just go back a step, one final step. That is, when we start our first code, let's assume you are starting to develop an application today in Python. It could be a machine learning application. It could be any sort of application. It could basically be any sort of application. Now, um, this application that you want to install, or sorry, this application that you want to create and run on top of Python, you're running it on top of Python 3.12, and it'll have additional dependencies. Now, one thing that we need to know, Python itself is not a superbly powerful language on its own. Python itself is not a language that can do wonders on its own. Python relies and utilizes a lot of additional third-party libraries that help it. If you want to do machine learning, if you want to perform machine learning to identify, let's say, um, something like license numbers in a car image, or if you want to connect to a database like Azure SQL database, or if you want to read some Excel files and perform some operations on top of it, whatever you might want to do, you will end up using additional third-party libraries on top of Python. So one thing that we need to know is Python by itself is not powerful. We're going to use a lot of third-party libraries, and that brings us to our next point. These third-party libraries are also most of the times open sourced. For example, I'll just walk through this to begin with. Also, hey James, hey Colin, nice to have you guys in the session as well. Yeah, again, given it's day one and we're getting to know each other, I just want to ask one query to James and Colin as well. Can you guys just let me know, like, what is your expertise and experience in programming and Python specifically so far? So I'm able to understand you better and we can work along with these sessions in a better way. You can either unmute and speak or you can just put it in chat window. Anything should be absolutely fine.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, can hear you, James.
Sure thing. Yeah, in college I used Python to sort of, yeah, I was in college when COVID was first coming around in the news, and I made this project where it took all the data that the hospitals were releasing about the COVID cases they were getting from around the country. And yeah, I used Python to go through the data and sort of give statistics on like how many deaths were occurring, how many cases you were getting, stuff like that. So I used Python before to just go through raw data.
Right. That's pretty awesome. In that case, this session is going to be more of a refresher to you because there are a lot of things that we are beginning from scratch, given a lot of participants are new to Python as well. But at any point of time, whatever query you might have during the session, feel free to just go ahead and ask. You don't have to hesitate to interrupt. The session is made so that I can serve you guys to help and work around Python better than hopefully before. So that's the whole point, and that's pretty awesome what you've done. So thanks for letting us know, James.
Sounds good.
So hey, Colin, we can go ahead with you if you're able to unmute.
Hi. Yeah, so I have used Python all throughout college. It was, my main programming language. I went to school for software engineering before I did my master's in data science. But yeah, so I've used it for all kinds of projects, learning how to program sorting algorithms and, other algorithms, those kind of things. And then up in grad school, using it for AI and ML projects. So all kinds of stuff.
That's pretty awesome again. That's quite awesome. So we have a lot of diversity in our session as in terms of participants and their experience with Python. So yeah, to a lot of you, it might be a refresher, and to a lot of you, it might be something that we are learning from scratch as well. So yeah, there might be a scenario given that we have a diverse set of participants where some of you might feel that, hey, I know this pretty much, and it's more of a refresher to me. A few things and it might be new to you, and to some of you, it might be a whole new dimension of programming language that you're working around as well. So, yeah, there will be a difference when it comes down to that. But throughout the session, feel free to always reach out and ask and query anything that you'd like to, because yeah, I'm pretty sure that whatever query you might have regarding anything that we go through, um, feel free to ask so we can have a conversation on it. I can respond to it and we can work around it. That should not be a problem. Anyway, thanks a lot for that. So moving ahead from here, why I wanted to point out to this back to the scenario is that you can take a look at this. That is just one example. We have a specific library and a third-party library that we use on top of Python called NumPy. Those who work in data science will know that environment's sake, I'm just going to take this as an example. As you can see, this is a digital public good, right? It's an open source project that is done by various developers who do not do this to sell this as a product, but do this so that this can be utilized by the community, the Python development or developers community across the world. And with this, let's get back to the whole idea. Yeah, with this, the latest version they have is 1.2 or 1.26. Now, let's assume this is the latest version we have, 1.26 or 1.26. And if you're developing some application today, you're going to use Python 1.26. However, let's say a few weeks ahead, you're going to start developing a new application. And let's say NumPy comes up with the version 2.0 with some pretty major changes. And any application developed with this will not work with this. And what you need to do is, if you're going to create a new application, let's say this is your second application with the NumPy 2.0, in that case, you're going to have to replace this NumPy 1.26 with NumPy 2.0, which means this particular application will not work. Only this one will. And if you want to run this, again, reinstall 1.26 and uninstall this. That's going to be a pain, right? We cannot do this constantly, especially when you're a developer and you might deal with multiple projects simultaneously. With this, what we essentially do is any application or any project that we undertake, we end up keeping it as a separate environment or a separate environment of Python so that all the third party or additional packages. Again, I'm so sorry for the slight delay. I'm still somewhat facing a few issues with my connectivity to my monitor. So I'm just gonna try reconnecting this. So yeah, this should work fine. So please bear with that. Did not expect or intend for this to happen in between. But yeah, moving ahead. This is the main reason why we always create each project that we work on in Python in a different environment. So the first project we created will run it in one environment. The next will run it in a different environment, so that anytime we want to run the second application, we switch to whatever environment it is in, and we run it. And whenever we want to run the first application, we switch to this environment and run it. That's the advantage of creating environments within Python. Now, we're going to use Python's inbuilt environment creator. For those who are already familiar with this, there's another application manager, or specifically a package manager within Python called Conda. This is again a third-party application that you have. If you are interested in this, if this is new to you, you can take a look at this. Conda is a third-party package manager, as it specifically points out here. It's a package manager for Python, which is much, much better than the default package manager we use in Python. For day one, let's start with default package manager, but over time, we can move to Conda. Installing Conda is quite an elaborate process because it requires a lot of space and data. So in short, if you want to work on it, you can just have Conda installed over today, and maybe we can start with this ahead in the coming sessions as well. I'll just speak about the differences within Conda and Python when we start with it, possibly in the coming session. But for now, we can just start with the basic virtual environment in Python. So let's start with that. Let's create our own virtual environment so that whatever package we install or whatever third-party libraries we install in our virtual environment, it will not be installed outside of it. It'll only be installed in that virtual environment. Let's call it as V1. And all the other virtual environments or the base Python variant or the base Python package that you have outside of all these virtual environments is unaffected by any package you install within it. That's the whole process, or that's the whole purpose of it. So let's go ahead and start with this. Now, to create a virtual environment, we use the inbuilt module within Python that is called VENV. Basically stands for virtual environment. Let's create our first one. Just so you know, this is the directory we are in, Python tutorial. It's currently empty. So let's create a virtual environment. I'm just going to use Python -m, specifically stands for make or create. We're going to create a virtual environment, and you can name that virtual environment anything you want. Typically, we use a name that can help us identify with the project. So if you're working on a particular project on, let's say, a data analysis for COVID cases or something like that, so you can just call it as COVID environment or something like that. That sounds terrible, but let's not worry about that. So you can name the virtual environment something that helps you identify what it is for. This is especially useful when you have a lot of virtual environments over time because of a lot of projects that you'll be running on. And it becomes difficult to maintain or keep a track of which one is for what. Since we're learning basics, I'm just going to call this as basics_env. You don't necessarily have to name it with _env. It's just a procedure of naming that I follow. You can name it however you'd like. So once you do this, it'll create a new directory called basics_env. This is the directory in which your Python virtual environment is going to be available. In this case, let's just take a look at this. Once this directory is created, you can see all these directories and files up here. So any additional package that you install will be installed here. Currently, you see there are no additional packages installed. All the additional packages you'll install will be within lib and site packages. This is where we have it. Now, moving ahead from here, moving on to the next one. Let's go into this environment and start working around it. Prior to this, if you want to know what other features virtual environment has, you can just use Python -m venv followed by ~help. This is going to give you all the information. That is, what are the things that virtual environment can actually do. That is, you can use an argument. There is a directory in which your virtual environment will be created, like we did, or you can add some additional information, like you want to upgrade some environment and so on and so on. So all these sort of things can be done. Now, one thing that we need to know, there might be some cases, there might be some scenario where you might need to install a virtual environment with a different version of Python. Like, think about this. Currently, I have Python 3.12. What if for one project I need Python 3.8? I'm giving you this information because just so you can relate this to a real world scenario, I'm just going to compare this. Yeah, there we go. Not this. Or yeah, I think this should be a good enough example for us to begin with. There are some CUDA toolkits which are compatible with specific Windows versions. For example, if you have a driver of 441.22 or ahead, you can use this particular toolkit. Otherwise, if it's an older version, you have to use this particular toolkit, and so on, unless you upgrade this driver. Similar to this, we have a lot of compatibility issues that might occur with Python as well. Um, I'll just see if I can find one or two. If not, we'll just consider this. Yeah, okay, this is probably the best example. Yes. There we go. PyTorch and Python compatibility. PyTorch, again, most of you who are already into machine learning might know this in prior. PyTorch is a additional library or a package that you use to um, develop and inference your own machine learning models. Now, here's the condition. If you want to run PyTorch and you have a specific version of Python, you need to install a specific version of PyTorch as well. So whenever you go for Python, um, if your Python is 3.8 or prior, you need to use a specific version of PyTorch alone. If it's 3.9 or higher, you can use additional versions and so on. So there are some things that you can see here. Like, for example, this is exactly what I wanted to point out. February, there was this article where somebody had asked, like, PyTorch supports Python 3.10, 3.11 isn't fully supported yet. At this point of time, when you're developing your application is being developed with Python 3.10. But in a new application that you develop, you might use a newer version of Python, let's say Python 3.11. At this point of time, what happens is you might have to maintain not just multiple environments with single Python version like 3.12. In our case, we only have Python 3.12, but we have multiple environments only to maintain additional packages. Like here, I can have NumPy 1.26. Here, I can have NumPy 2.0 when it arrives or so on. But what if I want to have different versions of Python alone? In one environment, I need Python 3.12. In another environment, I need Python 3.8 because there's some additional libraries which are not supporting Python 3.12 yet. So I need Python 3.8. In that case, to make it easier, you can do this using venv that we just learned. But if you want to make it easier, much easier to do these, we prefer to use Conda. So I'm not going to go directly within Conda right now. We can do that ahead in either in the second half of this session or in the next session. But just so you know, if you want to have multiple projects that you're developing and each project needs a different version of Python, then you can use Conda to make it very easy so that you can have one environment with Python 3.12 and another environment with Python 3.8. That's just something that we need to know in prior. So I think we've spent a lot of time talking about all the things that we can do as best practices before we begin our first line of code itself. So yeah, let's just move ahead and continue with this. Now, if there are any queries still here, please feel free to ask. If there are no queries, we'll move ahead. I'll just take a few seconds and wait for any queries. All right, awesome. So we can go ahead in that case. Right, so let's go on. Now, moving back to this, we have created our environment, and I'll just specify here for reference. I'll just write some info.text. I'm just going to copy this for reference in case you want to access it later on and just check it in case you might have forgotten this or so on. So right. So once we create a virtual environment, the next step is to get inside of this virtual environment and start coding in it. Because any package that we install should be within this virtual environment. Now, to enter a virtual environment, it's quite easy to do that. All you need to do here is within this virtual environment, you have scripts folder. Within the scripts folder, you have activate.ps1 file. It's specifically a PowerShell script that we want to run. So all that we're going to do, and in our case, is just run this shell script that is activate.ps, and it'll start our virtual environment basically. So let's do that. I'm just going to write to do this. I'll just have to go to that directory and run it. Currently, I'm in Python tutorial, which is our current directory. I'll identify it with dot. So current directory is always identified with a dot. From the current directory, I need to go ahead a slash to the next inner directory, which is basics. And ahead of this, I need to go to the next directory, which is scripts. So let's go to that. Ahead of that, I need to then run this activate.ps1. So I'm just going to write slash activate.ps1. There we go. I'm just using tab to perform autocomplete. The moment I write scripts, I just type S and press tab to autocomplete. So as long as there's only one directory that starts with S, it'll automatically fill up that directory. Since Activate has multiple files, it doesn't know what to fill, so it fills the minimum common criteria of them and leaves the remaining so that I can type whatever is required. So I'm just performing the same, and we have this. So I'm just going from my current directory and I'm going to run activate.ps1. Once I do this, you can see in the terminal on the left hand side, you get this environment name in brackets. This essentially means that we are within our virtual environment, which is basics_env. And this means that any package installation that we do will be installed only within this particular environment. It does not go outside of this environment in any way whatsoever. And now with this, we'll just take one small example to understand. Now, if I just go back here, type Python, and I write import numpy. Import is if you want to load in any package. The moment I write import numpy, it says no module name numpy. That particular package doesn't exist or module doesn't exist. So I need to install it separately. I need to obtain it separately. So whenever you have any third-party packages, all these third-party packages are installed within this, let's say, package index or repository called PyP. This is where all the third-party packages are installed. If you want to get to know how to install any packages, you can just go to pyp.org and search for the package name within here. I want to be able to install NumPy. So I'm just going to search for it, and it's going to give me all the versions. I'm going to take the latest one that we have. So you can see NumPy is one package. There's something called NumPy1 as another package somebody has developed and put it up here. So since this is open source, anybody can do this. Even you can create your own package for others to use. If you feel that your own package is useful enough for people, you can do the same as well. So that's one thing you can always do. Right, so let's go to NumPy. This is what we need. To install it, you just need to run this. Pip, followed by install, followed by the package name. It's a fairly simple process. You just need to use pip install followed by NumPy. By default, it will always install the latest version. If you want any older version of it, instead of 1.26.1, if you want 1.26.0, you just have to use double equals 1.26.0. So it's going to find and search for this particular version specifically. If I try 1.26.5, for instance, it's going to try to search for that version. If that's available, it'll find and install it. Okay, just maybe a few seconds. I think my antivirus thinks pip might be a virus. So yeah, it just took a few seconds. So there we go. Here it says ignore the following versions because 1.26.1 does not exist. These are the versions that exist. This is what it's saying. So let's install 1.26.0, for example, which is available as we know. It'll install it. Should not take much time. If you want to uninstall any package, again, fairly simple, just use pip uninstall space the package name. It's just going to uninstall whatever version of that package is installed right now. Now, before we go ahead, I'm just going to run Python here. Now, please remember, we're still within this virtual environment that is basics_env. The moment I start Python, if I import NumPy, it should not give me an error. You see that it executed and we went to the next line to code. It did not give us any error. This means NumPy is installed. To make sure that our theory is correct, to make sure that this particular package is installed only within our environment and not outside of it. Currently, we went into our environment by running that activate. Let's exit it by running deactivate. And we will see if we can access that package, NumPy, outside of the virtual environment. If we are not able to access it, then it was installed only within the virtual environment, as we expected it to be. So let's see if we are able to replicate it, just for our understanding. So to exit, you just have to write or type deactivate. That's pretty much it. It doesn't matter which directory you're in, as long as you have entered a virtual environment. To exit it, just type deactivate. And there we go. We have exited the virtual environment. Now, if I type Python again, and if I type import numpy, it says module not found error. This particular module is non-existent. Right. With this, let's just get back to our virtual environment, which is again from a current directory to environment to scripts and activate. And we should be able to activate our environment back again. So this was just a brief info on how to activate your virtual environment. So to deactivate it, just type deactivate anywhere. That should be fine enough. To install a package, it's pip install package name, or you can also do it with, let's say, pip install package name double equal to, let's say, version here. To again uninstall a package, you just have to write pip uninstall package name. Right, that's pretty much it. Now, moving ahead from here, whenever you work on this, just these are some basic things that we need to remember. That's pretty much all there is to it. Now, yeah. With this, let's move ahead over to the next case, and let's start with our first application. Any Python code that we develop will be in a file which will have an extension of .py. So let's just create our first directory here. Okay, I'm sorry for that. Let's create a directory here, and you can also create a directory within the terminal instead of using this. If you prefer that, you can just type mkdir. I'm just gonna write, okay, right. Let's create a directory. Again, all the things that we will learn, all the things that we will work on, I'll have them created in directories from 0, 1, and so on, so that we have a track of where we are on which date, and you can access the previous content anytime you require. So let's start with 01 underscore basics. This is the first directory we've created. As you can see, we have got this directory. Let's move to that directory. And once we do, we can start our first code. To create the first file, I'm just going to use this command touch space, let's say 01. Again, all the files will be named as 01, 02, 03, and so on, so that you have access to them in order. Just something I follow when it comes down to my sessions. So let's just call it as 01 underscore intro.py. Oh, I am so sorry. Touch is not something that is available within Windows. I often use Linux, so ignore this. So you can use cat. Let's see. Oh, okay. I should use cat greater than in order to create. Greater than will just create it. But yeah, this is one thing that you can use if you want, or you can just create a file over here, whatever helps you, whatever is easier. And now, after so much time, we can finally start with our first part of Python. Now, please note, again, I'm just stating this out because I know you guys already know this, but I'm just stating this out. Given the diversity in prior knowledge of Python, I will be starting from scratch. If any of you feel that, again, the same usual question, I'm going a little too fast or a little too slow at any point of time, or you'd like to ask any query, please feel free to, because I'm here to make sure that whatever we do in our sessions is best useful for you through the time. That's the main purpose. All right. So let's get started with the basics. Now, first thing, you can see here the bottom right corner, you see it says select interpreter. If you click on it, it's going to ask which Python version do you want to run. Right now, we have created our basics environment. this is the Python environment I want to run in, and I will select that. There are multiple versions of Python that I have, so ignore that. I want to select this particularly where we have our basics environment. I'm going to select that, and you can see that is what you have in bottom right corner, basics env, which is the virtual environment that is selected. So any code that you run here will run